Okay, so let's just go to last night, C.J. Stroud. And we were talking about this earlier. I think Ohio State's really good. I think C.J.'s a kid. And you, over the course of your Boise State career and your Washington career, sometimes your best quarterback is your youngest quarterback. So what do you do if you're Ryan Day? Because he was a little uneven last night in the first half. How do you talk him through games when he's going to see stuff he's never seen in games?
Yeah, that's really hard to do. You got to put him in the games. You can only do so much in practice. And then you have to just throw him in there, and you have to just stay calm, talking him through.
Do you coach him differently in a game, a younger quarterback?
You know, I would try to always coach him the same. You don't want him feeling different. So that's why I think practice, you're always in practice trying to recreate the game in practice. And part of that is your demeanor as well. If you're going to err on the calm side. And obviously what Ryan Day and those guys were doing was working. So they go in at halftime, and they come out and they just start rolling. So, you could go in there very easily at halftime and start to panic. We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you could just tell, like, they just got into a groove and away they went.
So it's very rare, Penn State, Wisconsin play. You almost never get a massive conference rival week one. Unlike the NFL, there's no preseason. Unlike the NFL, you're dealing with 18-year-old kids. For a consumer, it's great. But I think to myself, if I was a coach and I coach Penn State, the last team I'm going to see is Paul Kress and Wisconsin. When you've had one or two of those in your career where your opener is a hugely important game, does it change your game plan? Does it change your practices? I mean, that game almost feels too big for tomorrow.
You're right. It really does. It doesn't really change anything. You get about 8 days out from game time, and then you start in fall camp, you start honing into whatever opponent you're going to play. Now, everybody does work in the summer, analyzing their first three opponents. But when you play the league, you open with your league, you're going to know those guys a lot better. And so in some ways, the game planning comes together quicker than it would if it's somebody that you don't know at all.
Yeah, you kind of know what those teams do. Wisconsin's going to run the football right at you.
You've seen it. And you have a library of tape, especially when there's consistency at these programs like Wisconsin, Penn State. So it's almost too much tape. Sometimes you start chasing ghosts.
So I am a fan of Jim Harbaugh, but he's a big presence, and I think in college football that's just great for recruiting. In college football, the player selects you. In the NFL, you select the player. So having a presence, you had a presence. Pete Carroll at USC, big, and I think Harbaugh has that. And then about year 3 at Michigan, it's just kind of unraveled. And I read a story the other day in The Athletic where the AD sat him down and said, "We got to make some changes here." And I would theorize that Jim had a lot of power. And sometimes when you have a lot of power, we're all human, right? You lean into that and you don't want to hear, people are afraid to come at you and say, "Coach, I disagree." That's kind of my theory with Harbaugh. He's almost gave him a little bit too much power. Let's have him answer to certain people. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, he was successful in the NFL. It's successful as heck at Stanford.
Yeah.
About year 3 at Michigan, it went sideways. What did the personnel, what did you see? What do you think happened?
That's a really difficult question to answer because you'd have to know the inside operations. But I agree with you. He's a good football coach. You follow his track record, University of San Diego, like all of a sudden they start winning, goes to Stanford when Stanford is really hurting. Then you follow the track record, the guy can coach football. And I agree with you on the presence. I think he's really good for college football.
So do I.
And so you like those type of things. They've recruited pretty well. And so, I don't know what's going on inside of the program, but I admire and respect how hard he's competing and fighting to get this thing right. They adjusted his salary. He's changing staff. He's trying to get the recruiting thing going. He's doing everything in his power. And, he's fighting the tidal wave of public opinion. And that thing can get overwhelming. So he's just got to put the earplugs in and do his deal.
So Chip Kelly, it looks like this is the best UCLA team he had. Very good at tight end, very good at running back. They return all their O-linemen. It should be. It plays. It won't be as dynamic as maybe some of those Oregon teams. But you've coached. Chip very well. I think they have a shot to beat LSU tomorrow. Ed's on the rails a little bit here. Give me your thoughts. Chip comes into the sport, comes out west, and literally changes the pace of play. Your initial reaction to this guy named Chip Kelly at Oregon, I mean, it was the first time you saw what he was doing, and your reaction to what he's done at UCLA.
Well, I loved what they were doing at Oregon, and of course I was, tied into that program at one time with Mike Bellotti, and so I knew all those coaches for so long, and then saw how they kind of adjusted their scheme and took the next step, and it was transformative.
No, it certainly was on the West Coast.
I mean, I think it did it across the country into high school football and everything. And then, people catch up and adapt to styles, and it's not such a unique style. But the one thing that everybody knows about Chip is he's a good football coach. X's and O's, and he's into running the football, and, he does a great job with that. There's just so much more to like the program than just X's and O's. It's culture and having time to get your way established of how you want it. And so he walks into a culture at Oregon that Mike Bellotti was there for so long, and they had a certain way of doing things, and it was really good. And then they just come out with this new scheme, and it just blows up and takes off and transforms football. And so you got to have time. And so Chip's been there a couple years now at UCLA, and I think they're ready to roll as well.
Yeah, it's not the SEC. UCLA is going to give you a little time. We were just talking about this. One of my favorite shows years ago was Seinfeld, and I have a Hollywood buddy one time. I have one Hollywood buddy, and we were talking a couple of weeks ago. He said it would be canceled today because you don't get 2 years to figure out a TV show. And he said, nobody has any patience in Hollywood. Literally, you can do a show. If the executives don't like it, you get one episode. He goes, most of the great shows of our lives were bad in the first year.
Right.
And in college football, similarly, there's so much money now, people are impatient. If, let's say you take over a good name program, not great good, you got 7-8 wins, you're okay. What is a reasonable amount of time? I mean, you took over Washington. They were winning about 7 games. How many years did it take you before you looked at your staff and thought, we can really go toe-to-toe with almost anybody?
It's going to take about 18 to 24 months to transform a program into the culture you want, depending on how different it is.
Well, it took Nick that, by the way. He lost to Louisiana Monroe first year at Alabama.
We had to win my second year at Washington. We had to win our last 3 games to even get to a bowl game. So we get to it. We win this bowl game. And the next year we go to the college football playoffs. And the whole time you're like, are we going to ever figure this out? The second year felt better than the first year. We had a bunch of young players, and you could feel the culture going, but you're losing still. You're losing games. And so you still like, are we going to ever get this right? But you watch the kids and you see the buy-in. Are they in? Are they practicing hard after a hard loss? They come back on Monday and Tuesday and they got a chip on their shoulder and they're ready to roll. And that's the one thing we did feel about our crew the second year. So it really can take 2 to 3 years. And you're right, nobody has patience. I used to say that money's just like changed it and ruined everything. Money always ruins everything almost all the time.
Yeah.
And even as a head coach making a lot of money, I just say, man, that the trade-offs are like, this doesn't feel like what college football should be all about when you can't really build something, because when you pay somebody so much money, they expect results quickly. That's what leadership's all about, to take productive change. Like that's the purpose of leadership, is to have productive change.
It's interesting. In the SEC, they don't have as many pro sports franchises. So the college football in the SEC feels bigger. I mean, their saying is it matters more here. And they're right. Out West, I mean, in LA, we got 2 of everything. It's 2 NBA, 2 baseball, 2 NFL. Is somebody that loves the Pac-12, I can't even half the time get the Pac-12 network on my TV. You could have gone anywhere in the country, but you were a West Coast guy, and that's where your home was, and you stayed there. Do you worry about the Pac-12 going forward? Are you concerned?
100%. And not only just for the sake of the Pac-12, I don't think it's good for college football for the Pac-12 not to be good. Like, I don't think this zero-sum game works in college football. Like, I don't think it's good for the Big 12 to dissolve or take a step back. Like, I think parity is what we want.
Yeah, big competitive games.
But there's no really rules right now, it feels like. In some ways in college football, it feels like it's a race to the bottom. There's no guardrails. There's no, everything's changing so rapidly. And there's nobody to really say, okay, this is exactly what we're doing. Name, image, and likeness. Everybody's trying to figure that out for themselves from campus to campus, conference to
on
conference.
the fly.
On the fly. And they're just panicked because it's like, can we do this? Can we not? And, that's just one small little thing. And so I'm really concerned about, it'll adjust and we'll adapt and all those things, but I'm a college football guy and I love college football.
So do I.
I love watching it. I don't like watching my football. That's why I'm sitting here with you, but I like watching college football and I really care about it. And so I just hope for the health of the game that we can get some guardrails and we get some leadership and direction. It just feels so transactional right now.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not what college football, I haven't known college football. I've never thought about it as transactional. It's, I know it sounds corny and all these things, but the relationships and the things you do for some of these kids and putting them through the process of college football and getting that degree, to me, that really matters because I've seen it change lives.
Oh, families, yeah.
Completely. But now it's just how much money can I get in name, image, and likeness? Where do I go to get to the NFL as fast as I can? And we're all about that. Every coach wants his guys to go to the NFL. You want to help them be their best and chase their dreams. But there's got to be a certain way where it's just not the wild, wild west and a free-for-all.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to give you a couple quick questions. I'll put you on the spot. Best team in your years of being a head coach in college football, best team you ever saw that you watched either on film, you were prepping for them, you played them, or you watched. That you watched as a consumer or live perhaps and thought, we can't compete with that.
Well, I'd never go there and say, we can't compete with that. I don't know any coach competitor is going to go what you're like, okay, these guys are darn good. Obviously, when we played Alabama in the playoffs a couple years back in 2016, they just had draft pick after draft pick in the D-line.
And the film looked incredible.
Well, it was like they brought in their second D-line and there's no drop-off. And you're trying to figure out 8 guys. Usually you're figuring out 2 guys that you got to take care of, in the D-line. They got 8. They were really good. The year after that, we played Ohio State in the Rose Bowl.
I remember that.
And I thought they were really, really good and underrated. Now, they were still 5 or 7 in the country, didn't make the playoffs that year, but on tape, I thought they were as good as anybody. Urban's last year, so I knew they were motivated. That's a matchup that I was really worried about. And we were on our heels most of the game to catch up and just even kind of make it close.
Best player you ever saw? Coached against, saw, that you just could not believe how good he was?
Well, I always, you get to know your own guys and you have such an affinity for those guys. But, just as a raw football player was Shaq Thompson that we had up at Washington.
Oh, Shaq could play. Shaq could have been an NFL back, linebacker, safety. Seriously, he's the best athlete I've ever seen play high school football.
And he won the Thorpe Award, so that was an accurate award. Sometimes these guys get awards, and I'm like, that's not the best player there. This guy. So we moved him to running back for about 3 games because we got him.
I remember.
And he ran for over 100 yards in every game. And I'm like, Shaq, we good? And he's like, no, I want to go back to linebacker. So
he could do anything.
He could do anything through kicks and punts and all that. And so he, that just as a football player, it's like, wow, this guy's old school. He would have been a great 2-way player.
Yeah. In fact, he was the number 1 rated athlete in America out of high school that year. Number 1 California player, Shaq Thompson. I've talked to Sark about that. Sark's like, you just could not believe what you saw.
And he was so fun just to be around. He liked to, he liked football. He liked to practice. The games were fun. I remember, I think it was our second game, my second game at Washington. We're playing Georgia State and we're losing at halftime. And we're getting booed, deservedly so. And I'm running off the field going, oh my gosh. And Shaq runs next to me and he looks at me and he goes, Coach Pete, this isn't Boise, Idaho. These fans will get after you in a heartbeat. And he's laughing, saying it. And it made me laugh and it made me relax. And we go into the locker room, actually more relaxed, and came out and we were fine. But that was Shaq, not only just a great player, but just played the game for the love of the game.
Love it. Great seeing you.
You too.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.